During our Farm Basics time today, we want to talk a little about ditches. And you might think of ditches as just a necessary evil alongside the road, but actually ditches are really important in farming, and there is some management steps that farmers need to take to make those ditches better for their own purposes.
Well, it's interesting. You've got these grassy areas right along the outside of the field, and you think, I'm not going to spend too much time there, but guess what? A lot of the weeds and insects that get into our fields may start out in the ditches. So if you don't take care of them out there, you could have a bigger problem in your crop ground.
Well, beyond that, farmers are typically haying those ditches, and especially this year, hay is really expensive. So if a farmer can mow those ditches off and bale them up and use that grass for cattle or whatever livestock he might have, that's a big deal. So you can end up with lots of extra dollars of income on the farm if you can properly manage those ditches. And certainly not every ditch can be hayed. There's some that are way too steep, some that may be really, really narrow or something like that. But for a lot of the good ditches out there, if they're properly maintained, that's just like having a whole bunch more grassland that you get the income off of. And I'm just going to throw something out here that a lot of people have probably never even thought of. If you're a farmer, have you been fertilizing your ditches? Well, seriously. I mean,
not intentionally.
Well, you fertilize your crop. And, you know, we've talked on the show here about pasture ground and how pasture ground is probably worth at least 4 times the amount of money that it was worth just a couple of years ago, because commodity prices are high and everything is just terribly high priced right now in terms of all the inputs that go into cattle. So if you can get some extra grass, that's a big deal.
Well, I'd say this too, when you look at livestock right now, and the livestock producers are pretty much taking it in the shorts this year. It's a really tough year to make good money raising livestock. If you can get a feed source like your ditches that you may bale hay off of for not a whole lot of money, this makes a lot of sense to be doing. Also, it's a resource out there that we aren't utilizing. You can cut the grass, it's going to grow back. There's no problem that way. So why would you not utilize that resource that's right there, right around your own farm?
So what we typically talk to farmers about in terms of managing those ditches, the fertilizer thing might be pushing it. A lot of well, there are really no farmers I know that are fertilizing the ditches, but it does actually make sense.
But it's fun for Brian to talk about.
That's right. It does make sense this year. But beyond that, weed control and insect control are really musts. If you want to stop insects from moving into the rest of your field, or even just stop insects from feeding on the grass that is out there, then you want to spray with 7 or some other insecticide that is labeled for use in ditches. And then in terms of weed control, you can use LV6. You could go out there with Toradon or Milestone or something too if you had bad weeds. But if you just have a few weeds and they're mostly annuals or something like that, a quart of LV6 would do a great job.
Well, one other thing too, we get a lot of complaints over the years of, well, the county sprayed my ditch, or the township sprayed my ditch and it drifted into my field. Well, guess what? If you control the weeds out in your own ditch, they aren't going to have to spray out there. So if you want to manage that yourself, so somebody else isn't out there doing it for you, get the job done right and do it yourself.
That's right. And we'll tell you the same thing we tell people in terms of lawn care. When you're going to be spraying 2,4-D or any type of product like that that has drift potential to hurt crop, you need to spray, at least in the northern part of the country, mid-October and mid-April. And guess what? Guess how often you're doing that? Never. Okay, you need to change what you're doing, change your normal thinking. You wait for all these weeds to come up, then you go spray when everything else is done. How about you do it before you start everything else in the spring and right during harvest in the fall? Or right before harvest in the fall. Let's say you've got soybeans on your farm. Once all those turn color, you're pretty safe. Even if they get a little drift of 2,4-D, it's not going to hurt anything. So maybe September 15th or September 20th, you go out and spray your ditches right before soybean harvest. Just change your thinking a little bit, and then you can better manage these things. I mean, we've had the same situation on our farm. We sprayed ditches for years, and every year the beans would get a little dinged up. And I just said, this is stupid. We gotta do something different here. So we're now spraying early in the spring, late in the fall. Guess what? No problems, better weed control. We never have weeds out in the ditches. It's awesome.
Now the other complaint that we get a lot of times is, well, I sprayed them in the spring and now I got to spray them again. use a product that has a little bit of residual. You can use something other than just straight 2,4-D. You hinted at a few of the products like Milestone or Tordon. Use something that's labeled for that application. I'm not saying do something off-label, but there are products with residual. Go ahead and use them so you don't have to spray the ditch several times during the year.
Well, once again, ditches and ditch care are very important to farmers out there, and even if you're a non-farmer, you want to really pay attention to the weeds and bugs that are in your ditch. Well, another thing that you've got to pay attention to is our Weed of the Week. It can show up anywhere. We'll tell you what it is later in the show.